This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Today, I am just honored and thrilled. There's so much irony and beauty in who I have as my guest star today. So Chloe and I go back a couple 3 years, and our relationship has been extraordinary, unique and extraordinary to say the very least, since the very second that we met. And I've always just been really admiring, of Chloe's lifestyle and how she walks or prances or in some ways just glides or struts through the world. And all of those things really do apply to Chloé Lauer. So today's guest is Chloé Lauer. And again, Chloe, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Fred. Thank you so much for the invitation.
It really is great to have you, right? I'm going to touch base here on your biography rather than what I could say about what I know about you. I'm going to deliver a little bit about who you reminded me that you really are, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Chloé Lauer recently re-entered the field of urban planning after a 2-year hiatus, creating online courses in the emergent, isn't this time, a transformational travel space. Her current work, in conjunction with the Harvard Graduate School of Design graduate, with another fellow graduate, focuses on applying human-centered and data-informed design to the revitalization of sites and neighborhoods in the San Diego, California region where Chloe now resides. So it's just a pleasure to have you here, Chloe. So before we dive into today's conversation with Chloé Lauer, just want to take a quick minute to let you know that I just finally finished putting together the audiobook version of my written book called The Creative 8. See, this book teaches a surprisingly easy method for healing that utilizes simply creativity and self-expression. In truth, that's all you need: a connection with another person, creativity, and self-expression. So as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I want to give you a completely free copy of this audiobook as a thank you for listening to the show. All you need to do is go to welcometohumanity.net/creative. I've used this Creative 8 method with psychiatric patients, coaching clients, and even more recently with friends, and I've had some amazing results. The method takes less than 5 minutes a day. It's easy, it's fun, and it works. I know you're going to love it. Go ahead and download it. Go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and get a copy for yourself. Now, let's get back to our conversation with my good friend, Chloé Lauer. So tell us a little bit, what's going on with you? These are interesting and difficult times as we speak. And here we are on Friday the 13th having this podcast discussion. Who knew this was going to happen? And anyways, here we are. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with you these days, Chloe.
Yeah, well, I certainly couldn't have predicted this conversation. And I love how life has its twists and turns, including the coronavirus global pandemic.
Yeah.
Personally, I just have been starting to work again as an urban planner in conjunction with Stacy Pennington here locally in the San Diego area. And it's been so much fun to start, just be reminded of the depth of experience that I have in this field and to do something that I'm good at, which, the transformational travel program came naturally to me, but then the challenge that I faced was in terms of the digital marketing, and I wasn't able to really get that nailed down over 2 years. And I know 2 years isn't the longest time. Learning new things takes significant effort and can take time. So, but, it just wasn't right for me to continue pushing that when it did seem to be blossoming. So I shifted focus, and it's just kind of a relief, to play in a game where I really know the rules and I'm skilled at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying also just getting out of my Encinitas and Carlsbad bubble and going down into San Diego more often and having challenging projects to work on with really smart people. And then with this coronavirus thing, we all decided that today was our last in-person meeting for a while.
Really?
So it felt very bittersweet, to get dressed and ready and go and meet Stacy and carpool part of the way and then have our gathering and kind of say goodbye, at least for now, without really knowing exactly what's to come. So Yeah, I admit I did join the frenzied shoppers recently and have been part of what stripped the shelves of Trader Joe's from all of its goods. Like,
okay.
It is insane here.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's happening in Santa Monica, but yesterday only frozen vegetables were sold out. Well, of course, toilet paper has been sold out for weeks, but today it's pretty much like threadbare.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess I have some heaviness in my heart. And then to add to that, it's been raining here pretty heavily.
Right.
So that just puts another sense of doom and gloom.
You're right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really hearing in the theme, and there's a lot of things here, but I'm going to start with one of the first things you said in this conversation is that you absolutely couldn't have predicted this day where I'd be interviewing you on my podcast. I mean, when we really look at it, it's like, yeah, that wasn't... There was no sign anywhere that a day like that was ever going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, really, not so long later, having this in a very real setting, discussing really important issues about what's going on in your life, which, again, completely unpredictably has nothing to do directly with transformational travel, which is essentially all I know you at.
Right.
These kinds of things and the future that sits in front of us remain so cosmically unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that's coming on in front of us is so totally unpredictable. We certainly didn't see this virus pandemic thing coming. We didn't see. But then we start seeing that we didn't see much of what happens coming.
True.
And I think that's what I want to point at is that, the future unfolds into the unknown. And I think in real life, there's no one who knows that as much as you do, or more than you do. Let's put it that way. And there's something about, this transition, which is also just quite beautiful. This idea of, transformational travel, and then the transition to something that you're feeling like comfortably, supremely competent in.
Yeah.
Confidently competent in. Yeah.
It's a good way of using it.
Yeah, right. And so, what is it that you said it was a natural draw to transformational travel? Why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about what your travel history really looks like?
Yes. So I got my start in traveling through the world of higher education, studying German as an undergraduate in the late 90s, I guess it was. And so my first journey was a month-long trip with my German class, where we got to deepen our language study with 3 weeks in Germany and then 1 free week where we got to explore in whatever area we wanted to visit. And my friend and I went to Switzerland. And on the way there, we also visited Amsterdam. And just from the get-go, I was in love with the vibrancy of the culture, the walkability, people biking everywhere, and most notably the gorgeous, colorful currency. I just thought it was so beautiful to put artwork on your money. Why not celebrate life by having something you use every day, just be so absolutely colorful and beautiful in comparison to our pretty plain Jane dollars.
Yeah. In comparison, that's great.
Oh, and in addition, they were each one of them was a different size.
Mm-hmm.
So, that also made it easier to tell the difference between your 5 and your 10 and your 20 and in your wallet. Yeah, I just thought there was a lot of intentionality put into the design of the currency. And that just gave me a ton of joy. I remember taking a picture of it because one of the bills had sunflowers on it. I think it was a Van Gogh piece, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I just couldn't get enough of it. So after this month-long trip in Europe, I remember coming home to my dorm room and crying myself to sleep as I listened to Enya because I just wanted to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the seed.
Chloé, was it that you wanted to stay there, or was it that you wanted to stay on the road? Was it the destination, or was it the travel itself that had caught your bug?
Good question. Probably more the travel itself, because I enjoyed so many of the destinations along the way on that first trip. I don't think there was one in particular where I wanted to really put down roots.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that could be the first time.
So there was maybe something in the novelty, all the chronic discovery of a new culture, of things that you were unused to. So the chronic discovery of things that you couldn't have predicted, it seemed.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hey, the theme is really solid here.
Yeah, we are getting a theme here. And yeah, so that level of excitement had you coming home to the familiar and actually crying yourself to sleep on the first night, wondering, or I think activating a life, activating what then became an extraordinary life. If you can tell my listeners a little bit about that, an extraordinary life that over those next several years of incredible travels around the world.
Yeah, I think it was just this new place in my heart, like where my heart had expanded in this way that I hadn't predicted. And, it was just a little bit of reckoning maybe. And it wasn't like college was actually boring because it was pretty new every day too. Yeah, but it wouldn't be until about, I was 18 then. So 15 years later, after, I had traveled a bit. Like by the time I was 33, I had visited like 15 countries. But to me, that was like not near enough.
Right.
And I had like this huge, insatiable desire to like visit every single country in the whole world.
How many countries are there, Chloé?
There's approximately 200, give or take.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's a tall order. At the time, actually, my goal was just to simply get to 33 and have like one country per year of my life and then to go to a new country every year.
Okay.
I thought that was kind of like reasonable and achievable. So because I had been able to pay off my student loans finally and start to save a little bit of money, I decided to take a whole year off and travel for a year.
Now, just for orientation purposes, the job that you're taking a year off, was that a job in urban planning that you again now find yourself doing?
It was. In fact, I had been working in that field at that time for about 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you had made enough money or socked away enough money that it was okay for you, that it was legitimate for you to take a whole year off. And tell us a little bit about what you did in that year.
Well, I embarked on a literal trip around the world where I went west, starting from San Francisco. And I first landed in Hong Kong and stayed there for a little while, and then spent about a month in Thailand and Cambodia. And from there, visited India for 2 months and continued west into Turkey and Greece, Croatia, Italy, etc.
Etc. is a country next to Italy somewhere, or where?
Fred, you're funny. I don't know, like, if you really want me to like list every single country, but
no, I think the point is that it really is et cetera when it comes to you. How many countries have you visited, Chloé?
62 at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So you got to Italy
and I'm currently 40.
Yeah. So you're 1.5 now. You're at 1.5.
Yeah. I've surpassed my original goal.
Yeah.
Like in that year alone, when I was 33 and then I turned 34, I surpassed my goal and ended up visiting a total of 37 countries by the time I was 34. So I visited 27 countries in that year. So I continued throughout Europe, visited Madagascar as well, and then flew from Portugal to Brazil, which is actually fairly direct flight. You might be surprised. It's only like 7.5 hours, 8 hours.
Wow.
Spent about a month in Brazil, a month in Argentina, 2 weeks.
Wow. No, I would not have guessed that. Yeah.
I know. Who knew the Atlantic isn't that wide at that point? Yeah. And then I kind of continued around South America.
It's almost equidistant to Brazil from California, almost. It is from Portugal, yes?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about 8 hours from California too.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So then Brazil, and what came after Brazil?
Oh, Argentina for a month as well. I totally fell in love with Argentina and I had such a great time in Brazil. I had actually already been to Brazil. So that was my second visit and I got to see my friends again and spend 3 weeks at a beach, study Portuguese. And then in Buenos Aires, I started studying Spanish for the first time. And I've continued that Spanish study over the last 7 years. And yeah, I totally fell in love with many places that I visited.
That's fabulous. Wow.
Yeah. And then continued up through the other side of South America.
Yeah.
Came back to San Diego to be in my friend's wedding. So I think I wasn't the furthest person because she's from Taiwan. So her family came from Taiwan, but it was still pretty amazing that I flew from Lima, to be in her wedding. Yeah. And then I went back from LAX to Costa Rica and I kind of finished out my trip in Costa Rica and Nicaragua before coming back to San Francisco.
Wow. All right. Gosh, I mean, that's a mouthful. And that's only a part of who you became as a traveler, because as we mentioned, you developed a whole, a genre, a course, what would you call it, that you worked with here for a couple of years that you have transitioned from, this transformational travel. What is that?
Yes. Well, I discovered so much inner peace and inner confidence and also trust in the world and in other people through my travels, because these places that used to be concepts, like before I went to India, it was like a triangular subcontinent. Like there was no there in my mind because I didn't have that experience. But after being in India, it became so much more than that. It became like the people, and it became distinct states within India that I actually knew and had visited. Like I visited 11 states in India.
Wow.
And I learned the distinctions of the food and the transportation system, and I rode trains and I rode buses. So it went from being really flat to like being, like fully multidimensional, full spectrum experience. And I loved the traveling because I learned geography and history, through that lived experience. And I would get all these comments from women, especially, but men too, like on Facebook and social media. And they would say, "Oh, you're so amazing, Chloe. You're so brave. Like, I could never do what you're doing. Like, how did you do this? How did you pull this off? How did you, get the time off? How did you save the money?" And like, where I could tell people were experiencing a sensation of like a lot of barriers to entry on like something that they actually probably wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and there's also a lot of fear, like, oh, that's not safe. That's dangerous. Could get raped. You could get murdered traveling alone as a woman. And so
in some ways they were sharing their vicarious pleasure with you, like, what was working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I could tell that there was like a desire there inside of their comments, maybe. Or I thought there was.
Mm-hmm. So there was a vicarious pleasure and then something that was missing inside of their lives is that what you're referring to? Something that maybe a barrier or a blockade from them getting what they want for themselves.
Exactly. And also like them sort of giving me a higher status than I deserved, like putting me on a pedestal a little bit and saying like, "Oh, Chloe's braver than I am. I couldn't do it, but Chloe can," And I wanted to empower them and have them realize that they're the expert in their life and they're the expert in their travel and they're the expert in any area of life that they want to take on. And that I'm like really no different from them, except that I took on my fears, and that I took on my finances and accelerated my payments. I do totally understand that I started from like a privileged place as an educated woman with, the ability to have a strong paying full-time job. So I'm not diminishing that in any way.
Right.
And I even met so many people along the way on the road where I realized it's just the will and the determination that has people propelled to travel. And like even someone who was working at a pizza store making minimum wage saved $15,000 and traveled.
Right. So in some ways, your higher level education or, even your ability to work in a high powered, reasonably high paying job wasn't necessarily a strength or even something that made it easier for you to travel than some other people who might not have had the same level of fortune.
Yes and no. Yeah. I mean, you could view it as a privilege and a strength. At the same time, other people have also been able to do it. And so I knew it could be available for anybody. And I wanted to get that out there, especially to women. And so I created this course where I basically distilled every single thing that I knew and that I had put into creating my own travels. And, after that trip around the world, I continued traveling to like 5 or 6 countries a year for the next few years. So like I got even more experience under my belt. And then it was 2 years ago that I left my job and decided to commit to, creating this course full time and being a content creator and like a travel coach and empowerment coach for women. And mainly inherent in my philosophy is a belief that adventure is wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are the source of your own adventure and I'm the source of my adventure. And so you don't have to go all the way around the world even to find these like moments of transcendence or awe or wonder or like
right.
just gaping pleasure at the unknown, which I think is that like excitement that a lot of people like are missing in their life, that sense of like pure aliveness.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it was even just like training people to have a mindset to desire to try things they've never done before and to experience new things starting in their own backyard. And then like using that as a launching pad for like trips that are like gradually further and further afield. And so that to see travel and adventure as a muscle that you can train, just like you would train in the gym and train for a marathon. It's like you don't start running 26 miles, you start running half a mile and then a mile.
Yes.
And so for people who are really intimidated, it was like scaffold the training and have them start to like experience these wins and realize that they can build courage by being courageous.
Beautiful. One thing, I wonder if you know this, Chloe, even though you in your own life have stepped away from that being your primary job description, your primary vocation at this moment, who you're being and who you are and what your experience is, as well as the way that you have designed a life that has you having been to 62
at this point. 62.
62 different countries as well, and the inspiration that you are just by being you doesn't stop just because you no longer are, running transformational travel. The impact you're having on people continues at probably a similar level. I wonder if you know that or you have any thoughts about that.
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would venture to guess you're probably right. And
yeah,
it was just, there was some grief and like sense of loss in terms of letting go of pursuing that endeavor
right,
as like a full-time thing. And then also some disappointment and I don't know,
right,
bit of ego death maybe.
Yeah.
And just like the frustration, honestly, of like putting so much effort into something and not really seeing it turn out the way that you expected, which I know that you understand with some of your endeavors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. So yeah. And in this, let's see if we can put this together a little bit, but in what we have discussed already, there's the idea that number one, what you came to learn, which is you don't have to go very far to travel into, gaping, exciting, adventurous experiences.
Right.
You don't have to go to the center of India or anywhere on the west coast of South America to make adventure actually occur where you are. And that's a lesson that my listeners and everyone who gets to be in your space learns every single day. Maybe that's something you represent.
Thank you.
And maybe that's who you are even as you now shift into, dare I say, returning back to urban planning.
Mm-hmm.
That, like you become an inspiration. Don't lose your inspiration just because you have decided to change direction about what is your primary vocation. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. And it is true because even this new endeavor as a urban planner is an adventure, certainly. And it represents this opportunity that I never first saw, which is to like have a pretty significant impact on a city due to the connections, that I'm blessed to have through my like colleague, Stacy, who's very well connected with leaders here. So yeah.
I wonder if you can explore with us and maybe share with my listeners today any kind of crossover that might be taking place that makes urban development even more satisfying now, having gathered the skills, the experience, the knowledge, the wisdom that you got by creating the course, but more so maybe even by all the travels that you've done. And your ability to communicate effectively, your ability to be comfortable in unknown, your ability to carry on with others. Is there some crossover that has this time around in urban planning be even more satisfying for you, perhaps?
That's an excellent question. I think there's probably thousands of yeses to that. One of them is the capacity to be with ambiguity and unknown and still venture forward. And I think that's crystal clear because in my return to the profession, I'm not signing on to a full-time job. I still don't have a 401k. I mean, I'm creating my own, self-employment investment account after, not investing for 2 years because I was pouring my finances into my business. But even my agreement, with my new business potential partner, my colleague, it's tentative, it's like experimental, it's speculative, shall we say. And like, while it is definitely, I feel like I'm turning the corner from like the lowest of lows financially that I faced during the last 2 years and specifically last fall. I feel like I'm kind of bouncing back from that a little bit. It's certainly nothing like just like locking myself into a full-time job and salary. And so
isn't that great?
It is pretty great.
Yeah.
And I think it took letting go of that and going to the lowest of lows to realize that I'm still okay.
Yeah.
And that like I will be okay.
Oh yeah, you're definitely okay.
And then it also changes my relationship to money where like I actually value smaller amounts of money a lot more now.
Right. Even if they are the same size and the same color, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they don't have to have beautiful
Beautiful art, Van Gogh on them. Yeah.
flowers on them for me to think they're nice. Like,
Putting Van Gogh on a 20, that might not be a bad idea though, really.
and I also reduced, I think we
That's a great idea.
should,
That's a great idea.
out of this podcast, I think our new initiative is to redesign all our money. But the other thing was I definitely downsized in terms of, my expenses compared to San Francisco. And I totally shifted, my physical environment from being an urbanite to now I live in the suburbs and I actually love it. I love the peace and quiet. And yeah, so it's really that willingness to change.
Right.
And I think travel is something that has instilled that within me.
To change into something that you didn't see coming too, actually. So
yeah,
on real time, you're actually a superstar at changing into something that you didn't see coming. And at the same time, you're so sensitive to the future that, that is coming that you're unaware of at this, and you can be troubled by that at the same time that you're a superstar at making that transition on real time. It really is. It really is.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because in October, I couldn't have predicted that one day that I went to an alumni event and ran into Stacy, and now that's totally shaped, the last 4 or 5 months of my life.
So let's take a little bit of a dive into what you're doing the last 4 or 5 months. We understand a little bit now that you're living in the suburbs of sounds like of Carlsbad, and that you're venturing, your adventure, your exciting gaping adventure is into more often than not into, I guess, San Diego or the San Diego area. And what are you up to? Like, where is the turn on here?
Well, the excitement is just being able to lead and collaborate on human-centered design efforts related to activating some spaces that had gotten a little outdated in downtown San Diego, namely a place called Seaport Village, which I liken to Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. So yeah, Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco was a place that as a local there, I just never went to. There was no draw, there was no interest. It was kind of kitschy.
Right.
It was for tourists. And I didn't even understand why tourists would want to go there,
Right.
So
it has a cool name,
It has a cool name, sure. And sure, you can get some great clam chowder.
Good clam chowder.
But just the appeal wasn't there. And anytime I ran into a tourist in San Francisco, I would say I would give them 5 other recommendations of things I thought were more valuable in terms of their time in San Francisco. And so this place in San Diego, Seaport Village, was built in 1980 as an intentional outdoor shopping mall, a little bit like if you imagine a fishing village in Maine.
Okay.
So there's kind of a strange East Coast meets West Coast
All right.
vibe. And it has, a lot of tourist serving shops, and it's a bit hard to find your way around kind of intentionally, because they want you to stay there and to spend your money as a tourist. And what had happened was it was slated for some major development. And so there became these rumors that Seaport Village is shutting down and going to be redeveloped by some big time developers who are going to come in and tear it all down and then, put in towers and much more density. And so Stacy, who also went to Harvard Graduate School of Design, and that's how we met. So we had never worked together and hadn't spoken, for 15 years, but just because we have the same foundational training, it's instant connection, instant ability to collaborate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is just pretty magical, honestly.
Yeah.
So she's already been deeply embedded in this project, and she's the one who got the project, and I really commend her for her, visionary thinking. She's been a huge leader in the urban development space in San Diego for 15 years. And so I'm really riding on her coattails. I want to give her all of that credit. But what was happening for her was it was kind of the scope is fairly large, and she could use some more support, especially in running the data and analytics and doing some of the on-site surveys of people who are visiting and really putting all the qualitative and quantitative information together to craft a meaningful narrative about what is actually happening there now. What do people want? What is the story telling us, and how can we keep this place as vibrant as possible? Because as you know, nothing is ever for certain. So we don't know the development is probably going to happen, but it's going to be another 5 to 7 years at least.
Yeah.
And even then, we don't know for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So may as well like have it be as positive of a place as possible now.
Right. One of the things I've been noticing online on some of your posts is sort of I don't know if it's new for you, but it's a little bit new for me to watch your art come off the pages, come off the social media page, your drawn art. I'm wondering if there's some sort of creativity or artistry that's being born a little bit now that you're back into urban planning. Is there any kind of relationship between those two things? It seems like at least temporarily there might be a relationship, and that's why I asked.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, looking back, I think I started this drawing intensive period October 17th. And ironically, that same day I ran into Stacy that evening.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, like a huge portal really opened up that day, and it came from actually sadness and grief. Like the night before, I was like down and crying and depressed, and I started drawing because I didn't know what else to do with my emotions. And so I was drawing like the darkness, and inside of the darkness, there was still a little bit of light. And then that night I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up like on fire, like just the creativity was coming through me just effortlessly. And I started this YouTube channel where I was, making these drawings every day and then interpreting them with tarot card readings and really tapping into like this collective energy field and kind of giving it like a name and a visual identity. Yeah, it was such a therapeutic process for me. And that's so interesting to look back that it was that exact same day that I met Stacy.
It is amazing. And, I knew that it was close. I really didn't know that it was just a few hours from being the same day.
Right.
And again, I'm going to point out something that I think it's inherently evident from anyone who's listening to our conversation today. And that is, your ability to land in a completely new area of life and then just like experience it at such a full and self-satisfying, but such a full manner, like to actually embrace it all and what you're not embracing to then begin to embrace that. It seems like maybe these are two different lifestyles. Like there was a big break on October 17th. And I get that something happened that day. But it also seems like, you're just as lit up in being here as you were, as our listeners might have noticed while you were speaking about the fullness of transformational travel. Wherever you are, it seems like you have a capacity to integrate it and then embrace it as your own. Do you see that as being one of your superpowers?
Thank you. Yes, definitely. And and that's pretty much exactly what I wanted to relay and support others in finding and discovering for themselves. I think that's kind of exactly that element of the transformational travel program where, adventure is where you are. You are the source of your adventure. And then another one of the things that I remember saying a lot during that period was that the transformational travel program and having these never done before experiences, there are ways to build our capacity for life so that we just are operating at a higher capacity to take in more of life. And if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of speaks to what you just said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for people who have never met you, they probably wouldn't know that you're kind of tiny in a physical sense.
Yes.
And I'm not tiny. And so when we met, that was two things that at least one of our many contrasts that seemed to work together well as friends. Is there anything about the way you take care of yourself physically that you'd like to share with? Because I actually know you pay a lot of attention to that, Chloe. And I know that's a lead-in question. But really what I want you to be able to do here is share with our listeners some of the nourishment, some of the exercise, some of the practices, the things you do to take care of yourself, and at least in no small way, your physical self.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that is a big element for me. Having had a chronic illness, I got sick with Crohn's disease when I was 13 and 14. And so from that very early age, I have learned and been blessed, with this, what I call my sacred wound, which has invited me deeper into my physicality and to paying attention in that area and nourishing myself. So I actually thrive on a lot of support. So I have a lot of appointments, every week. I do not work full time, and I, intend to keep it that way. I visit an acupuncturist every week these days, also chiropractor every week. I also am seeing a really powerful therapist twice a week. So that's pretty deep work that we're doing, addressing some patterns, in my nervous system, some PTSD, as well as genetic things and past life things. And she's this incredible 77-year-old woman who's been meditating like 4 hours a day for 40 years. So she's like super clued in to some of the higher powers of the universe. And so besides being, a trained therapist, she has a doctorate. She also does energy healing.
Wow.
So I do energy healing like on myself as well as with the support of others regularly. I've just gone back to, in the past few months, a gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And I stopped drinking alcohol entirely last September. And then I walk 10,000 steps a day. I lift weights Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I practice yoga a couple other days a week. I sleep around the same time every day and meditate. Oh, I also meditate 20 more minutes every morning.
That's right.
I would say that kind of probably gives you enough of a snapshot. Is that right?
Pretty comprehensive for sure. And, for a lot of people, that might seem like it's an intimidating amount of energy being placed on your physical self. But I know that you don't see that way. I think you see it as just a framework from which you function.
Yeah. I know that I thrive better that way. Like it keeps my energy up.
Yeah. Right.
And helps me focus when I am working and has me be present and available for others and able to give to friends and family and loved ones.
Right.
I was doing that practice of like drawing every day, but I'm not anymore. So I do journal regularly. And then maybe now it's more like once a week, like on the weekend, I'll take some time and do one of those drawings again.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a real ease, believe it or not, again, a real ease, a real effortlessness, a real seamlessness to the way that you manage life, particularly even really how you manage yourself walking through life. And that's so we've already pointed to a great deal of your physicality, and we touched a bit on your spirituality, your emotionality. After all, you are a Harvard graduate, so your intellectuality and what that really meant as being that, and then how you get to use those skills to do things that you excel in, and even the identification, the self-identification of where it is that you excel is extraordinary. So you're truly an extraordinary human being, Chloé Lauer.
Thank you, Dr. Fred Moss.
You really are. It's like, sometimes we don't know that. And sometimes we have to be told. And there's something about really getting, well, I guess when you give me the data like that, it's hard to deny that I have an extraordinary life. And so I know when sometimes people will say similar things to me, and I'm initially like, no. And then I'm like, okay, there's something about being able to receive that can be resetting in its own right. So that's.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Oh, I forgot there's another thing. Well, I always like taking new courses and learning new things. So I'm taking a course called $1 Million a Year, where I'm looking deeply at all my finances, even though the person who created the course, Lori Ann, already considered me fairly financially literate and advanced. I decided I wanted to take it anyway. Because it just, when you shine a light on something, you always get something out of it.
That's right.
And then, I'm also taking the Marin NLP, Transformational Neuro-Linguistic Programming course out of Marin this year.
Wow. You don't have that much spare time on your hands, it sounds like. For when you can find those moments of spare time, what do you like to do?
Oh, I love being with my friends, and just like playing tarot cards with them, or going for walks, or sharing a meal together, cooking. I guess I sort of see friendship as one of those other like life nourishing things that I need for that support.
Right.
Oh, I listen to a ton of podcasts on my walks.
Okay.
And I love going to the beach. And I mean, I guess I'm sort of into fashion also. So like I'll choose outfits for myself.
I'm sorry. Did you say sort of into fashion? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you are. Pretty fashionable.
I guess I'm into fashion. Yeah. So I've just recently had a new creative burst, where I've been like choosing new outfits, and I did a little bit of shopping, which I don't do a ton of, but it just felt like it was the right time. But now it feels ironic. I'm like, I have all these cute new clothes, and might have nowhere to wear them if I'm quarantined.
Yeah. The quarantine. Right.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go to the quarantine right now. And again, we're living in difficult time. We don't know what the next intervention is, a national emergency today, and then quarantine and limiting assembly. And in the meantime, what we have is we have now. And it's amazing that, you or even myself in any way have been able to get the life that we've gotten up until now and then still have vision for how the life is going to proceed for us and then to take actions in the name of that vision, in the face of that vision. So just terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Chloé, before we close, we have a question I'd like to ask all our guests, which is there something going on in the world that really sets you off? Has it be that you are really committed to making a change or a difference in that area of life?
Yes, I did really appreciate this question. I contemplated it for quite a while. It bothers me and frustrates me that even as many strides as we've made, that women, people of color, non-gender binary, so I guess gender fluid, differently abled people, people with learning differences, people of different socioeconomic classes, like all these people who don't fit into the box of like heteronormative society, I guess, and cultural privilege, they struggle, or like not necessarily struggle, but there's like greater challenges for them to achieve kind of the same result. It's not like, I guess what I'm saying is there's not like an equal playing field.
Right.
And like, it's a complete reality, which I just never expected it would still be in 2020, because at different times it felt like we were making so much progress, quote unquote.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess I've just been made more aware in the last few years of those gaps, like huge gaps, like there still are, and of my ignorance about these matters and my like cisgender like perspective where I'm prejudiced and without even realizing it.
Right.
And my white privilege and all of these things. I mean, I'm still a novice in these areas, so I have so much to learn basically.
Yes.
But I am aware of it. And like, I do notice things. I mean, this is just a subtle thing. Like on Instagram, somebody put a quote up that was like about healing from trauma, but it used the gender pronoun he and his. And I was like, that's so like old fashioned. I was just like, that's so outdated. Like,
right.
I just felt like I thought that the person who was writing it would have been more enlightened or something.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. And so I wrote a comment. I said, I tried not to be annoying and negative. I just said something that I would like. I was like, I would love to see this quote also shared with they, their, and she, like.
Right.
Or she, her.
Without gender bias as something.
Yeah. And then the person's response was, oh, I'm just quoting the original source. And I was like, oh my God. I felt like that response was not at all adequate.
Yeah.
Because the original source was obviously of its own time, which was definitely even more patriarchal.
Right.
And than it is today. And we're still living in a patriarchal society. So I'm like, that's not the point. Like,
right.
I feel like that in that case, the original doesn't even need to be honored because it wasn't expansive. It wasn't enlightened. So it's actually more honoring to like upgrade the original.
Upgrade the original. Right. I got that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got that. And thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your discomfort with that. And I'm going to leave you with this question, which is, okay, so now you're the master of the world, which in some ways is the essence of transformational travel. After all, you're the master of your own world. And given that, what can you do, or what do you do, or what can we do to address this particular issue that just continues to just gnarl forward in our world, despite the fact that it's 2020 and so much progress has been made in some of these directions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly welcome the comments.
Is there something I can do?
I mean, my own stance is just like to be humble and be willing to learn and be educated by others. I think that's the best that we can do. But we'll also taking active steps toward education on these topics, like maybe taking workshops, which I haven't done yet. So I'd be taking my own advice. Yeah.
Right. I appreciate your acknowledgement of your own areas where you're not even aware that you're carrying the prejudices as well. So it's like a blind spot prejudice that we share that we don't even know when we're being violating the particular equalities you're talking.
Yes. Yeah. And I do follow some thought leaders on Instagram that are educating me. And so that's one step, but I think that's a very surface level, participation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really great, Chloe. We're running up against our hour, and gosh, it's always great to talk to you. It really is always great to talk to you. I met Chloe just a few years ago, and it really, as I mentioned at the start, we just hit the ground running, and literally hit the ground running. For those of us, we really just got started. Like, we really just got started talking about travel, doing some travels parallel with each other, and, really taking on the world in a way that had me always just really looking up to this diminutive yet amazing woman. So Chloe, it's just been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before we leave, can you tell our listeners where they might find you? You said you had a YouTube channel and a few different things. If they want to catch up with you, maybe chase you around the globe or chase you around your activities or learn from you or just, kind of follow you from the outside or maybe even get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Certainly. Yes, I have a website. So my website is CHLOELAUER, ChloéLauer.com. You can also email me Chloe@ChloéLauer.com. Or on Instagram, I'm _Chloé Lauer _. And I also have another Instagram account called Chloé Lauer Art for the art part. And on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel, Chloé Lauer, and same on LinkedIn. I do offer vortex healing. We didn't talk too much about that, but it's a type of energy healing, and I can do that remotely. So the listeners may be interested in that.
Sure.
Also, I can do it locally in the Encinitas-Carlsbad area, which is North County, San Diego. So I look forward to hearing from some of you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I recommend anybody who's even got an inkling of interest in learning a little bit more about what Chloé Lauer, is up to go right ahead and learn more and go right ahead and jump right in, go right ahead and reach out to her. She's an amazing woman. It's really just been a pleasure, Chloe. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. And, thanks for taking on yourself and the world around you and for really getting us a little bit up to speed with what your life is created by and who you are now and really your vision for the future. Again, Chloe, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks for having me. And cheers to our nomad period and to now having each our home address again.
Isn't that just great? Yes, cheers to that indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chloe. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now, Chloe. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really always enjoy talking to Chloé Lauer. She's just such a beautiful person. She's been around the country, around the world, and she's really out to just make a difference and to have a good time doing it. So it's really, really fun when I speak with her. She also happens to be beautiful and brilliant. So maybe while you were listening, you thought of a person who could really benefit or needed to even hear this episode. So go ahead and reach out to them right now and invite them to listen and to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. I'd love for you to subscribe. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button on that podcast player of yours. When you do that, you'll be able to get the latest episodes. And if you appreciate what we're doing here, go ahead and take just a few minutes and leave a nice review on Apple Podcasts. We would sure appreciate it. Subscribes and reviews are the best ways that we can reach more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast. So if these conversations we're having here move you in any way, well, go ahead and pay it forward. Subscribe, leave a review. We'd definitely appreciate it. If you want to catch up with some of the past episodes, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. That's welcometohumanity.net/podcast. So until next time, this is Dr. Fred. It's been another wonderful edition of Welcome to Humanity podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love you. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and be safe. Thanks again. Bye for now.